Hello, we are back here with Command Figures. Today, we are tackling a subject that feels like it's in the headlines every single day.
Oh yeah, literally every day.
You turn on the news, and it's Iran. It's always Iran. You know, nuclear deals, sanctions, regional influence. It's just this constant noise.
Right.
But I have to ask you, the listener, and be honest, do you actually know how this current system started?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't always this way.
It definitely wasn't. And usually, you know, when people talk about the Iranian Revolution, they have this montage in their heads. Crowds in the streets in 1979, fists in the air, the Shah leaving.
Yeah, the classic newsreel footage.
Exactly. But if we really want to understand the Iran we see today, the Iran of the Revolutionary Guard and the supreme leader, we have to look at the blueprint that was drawn up years before the first shot was fired.
Exactly. So our mission for this deep dive today is to really just cut through the noise and go back to the roots. We are tracking the timeline clearly and chronologically to understand that massive shift from a monarchy to a theocracy. And to do that, you've brought quite the stack of research today.
I have, yeah. We're digging into a really diverse range of sources to keep this objective. We have excerpts from Khomeini's actual manifesto, Islamic Government,
which is huge.
Absolutely crucial. We also have historical records on the Shah's White Revolution, widely accepted accounts of the 79 revolution itself, the hostage crisis, and some really gritty analyses on how the Iran-Iraq war cemented the internal politics we see right now.
Awesome. And the core question we're trying to answer with all these sources is this: how did a movement that included communists, liberals, and intellectuals end up consolidating into a strict theocratic rule?
Yeah, it's a huge paradox.
Right, because usually Marxists and clerics don't exactly hang out at the same parties.
No, they really don't. It's the million-dollar question. And our sources hint that the answer really lies in that specific blueprint I mentioned. There was a plan in place that a lot of the revolutionaries simply didn't see coming until it was too late.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to set the scene first. Before the revolution, what was the pre-game? What was happening in Iran that made people so angry?
Well, we have to start back in 1963. This is the era of the Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. He launches something called the White Revolution. Now, despite the name, this wasn't an uprising.
Right.
It was a massive top-down modernization program.
And white meaning bloodless, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It was a series of reforms intended to aggressively modernize Iran. And on paper, it looked huge. The historical records show things like land reform, taking land from the wealthy nobles and redistributing it to peasants.
Okay.
It included giving women the right to vote. And they established a literacy corps where young men could do their military service by teaching in rural areas.
And the stats from the government at the time claimed massive support, right? Like a referendum with 5.5 million voting yes and only 4,000 voting no.
That's what the regime claimed, yeah.
Wait, hold on though. I have to play devil's advocate based on those numbers. You're talking about land for farmers, schools for kids, rights for women. If I'm a regular person in Iran in 1963, I'm cheering for this.
Sure.
How does a modernization program trigger a massive backlash?
It is the classic tragedy of good on paper, but terrible in practice. The Shah looked at Iran and saw a backward country he wanted to force into the 20th century overnight.
So it was a mandate from above, like you will be modern, whether you like it or not.
Completely. Take the land reform. He breaks up these massive estates owned by the old aristocracy. Sounds great, but the plots of land he gave the peasants were often too small to actually survive on.
Ah, okay.
He didn't give them fertilizer, he didn't give them equipment or credit. The sources show he basically just gave them a deed and said, good luck.
So instead of creating a class of wealthy commercial farmers, he created what exactly?
He created a class of bankrupt farmers that couldn't survive, so they migrated to the cities in droves and ended up in these massive slums on the edges of Tehran. So he accidentally created a displaced, angry population right on his doorstep.
Okay, so the peasants are unhappy. But what about the clergy? I assume they weren't thrilled about women voting, but our sources say there was more to it.
It went much deeper. The White Revolution was basically a declaration of war on the religious establishment. The reforms secularized education. For centuries, the clergy controlled schools and family law, and the Shah just took that away.
He was directly stripping their power.
Exactly. And think about that literacy corps. Imagine a conservative village that has lived the same way for centuries. Suddenly, a young secular man from the big city shows up, sent by the government, bringing secular influence into the village.
Yeah, that would be a shock.
To the clergy, that wasn't just education, it was an invasion of their social order.
It's culture shock, weaponized by the state.
Precisely. And this is where Ruhollah Khomeini enters the picture. In 1963, he wasn't this quiet priest. He gave a blistering speech attacking the Shah personally, which led to his arrest and exile. That is where the friction really began to burn.
And that exile is key, because while the Shah is dealing with failing reforms and angry clerics, Khomeini is in the Jaf, writing the manual for what comes next.
Yes.
This brings us to part 2, the blueprint. He writes Islamic government, or Wilayat al-Faqih. So what was the core idea here?
The core idea breaks down Wilayat al-Faqih, which translates to governance of the jurist. Khomeini argued that Islam isn't just about prayer. He said it actively requires political power.
Which is a huge shift.
It is. Historically, many Shia clerics believed you stay out of politics until the hidden imam returns. Khomeini flipped that. He argued that in the absence of the hidden imam, the scholars, the fuqaha, must rule.
So it's a direct mandate for a theocracy.
Exactly. And he believed the masses needed guidance, so he called for a vanguard of professional revolutionaries to lead them.
But wait, earlier we said the revolution included communists, students, secular folks. Did they read this mandate for a strict theocracy and just agree with it?
No, they didn't. And our sources highlight this critical deception. Khomeini kept this specific jurist rule idea very quiet from his liberal and leftist allies.
Really?
Yes. When he spoke to the Western press or secular groups, he used generic freedom slogans. They thought he just wanted to overthrow a dictator. They didn't read the fine print about the theocracy.
Wow, they thought they were getting a democratic republic, but the blueprint was already set for a theocracy.
Exactly. He used words like vanguard, which sounded like Marxist theory to the leftists, but he meant a vanguard of clerics.
Talk about reading the room to get what you want. Okay, so we have the angry populace, we have the blueprint and exile. Now we move to the late 70s. The spark, what sets the whole thing off.
By the late 70s, the economy contracted hard after an oil boom. Inflation was up, people were hurting, and the Shah's secret police, the Savak, were brutally repressing the public.
Right, the atmosphere was just a tinderbox.
Yeah.
And then comes the horror of the Cinema Rex fire.
August 1978, around 400 people burned to death inside a theater in Abadan.
It's just horrific.
It really is, and the public immediately blamed Savak. They thought it was a false flag operation. The outrage was completely uncontrollable.
And then Black Friday happens right after that.
September 1978. Martial law is declared. Troops fire on demonstrators at Jala Square. That massacre was the point of no return.
Blood had been spilled, there was no going back. And the Shah tries to backpedal, right? Relaxing censorship and all that.
He tries to appease the public, but it's just too late.
The sources describe the scene on January 16, 1979. The Shah leaves Iran, supposedly for a vacation, boarding the plane in tears.
He knew it was over. And then on February 1st, Khomeini returns from exile. And there's this incredibly famous moment when a reporter asks him how he felt returning to Iran after all those years.
And what did he say?
He just said nothing.
Nothing.
Just nothing.
That perfectly sums up that he wasn't there for nationalist sentiment. He was there to execute the blueprint.
Precisely. And by February 11, the monarchy formally collapses, the military declares neutrality, and rebels take over the TV stations.
But the fight wasn't over. This brings us to the takeover and the hostage crisis. Initially, there was a provisional government led by a moderate Mehdi Bazargan.
Right, but he didn't have the real power. The shadow power was with Khomeini's loyalists.
Then in March 1979, there's a referendum. 98.2% vote for an Islamic Republic.
But again, people didn't necessarily know that meant clerical rule. They just knew they were voting against the Shah.
Which leads us to the real turning point. November 4th, 1979, the hostage crisis. Radical students stormed the U.S. Embassy. Now, looking at the historical analysis you brought, this wasn't just random anger.
No, it was deeply strategic. Khomeini actually called it a second revolution.
Explain why that is. Why was it so useful to him?
Well, the moderate government under Bazargan was trying to maintain some normal relations. Khomeini used the embassy takeover to destroy that moderate government. Bazargan had to resign because he couldn't free the hostages.
Oh, so it forced him out.
Exactly. It rallied the public against the great Satan, the USA, and created this massive crisis atmosphere. And in that chaos, the hardliners were able to pass their constitution.
The one enshrining Wilayat Faqih.
Yes. They passed it with very little opposition because if you criticized it, you were accused of siding with America.
That is ruthless political maneuvering. And they consolidated that power violently. The sources detail these revolutionary tribunals executing opposition, drug traffickers, former regime members. The spring of freedom turned into an absolute crackdown.
It did. And just when the internal purges are peaking, September 1980 hits. Saddam Hussein invades Iran.
The Iran-Iraq War. Saddam thinks Iran is weak from all the revolutionary chaos, right?
That was his miscalculation. He thought he could just roll in. But our analyses suggest that this war actually saved the regime.
Because it united the country against an outside threat.
Exactly. It wasn't just a war to them, it was framed as a holy defense. You couldn't ask for a better way to silence internal dissent than a foreign invasion.
And this is exactly where the Revolutionary Guard, the IRGC, is born.
Right. Khomeini didn't trust the regular army. They had been the Shah's military. So he created his own parallel force, the SIPA, or IRGC.
They started as a militia, but the war transformed them.
Completely. Over 8 years of brutal combat, they grew into a massive military, political, and economic power.
And because of the global arms embargoes, they couldn't just buy weapons. They had to build their own industry.
Yes, that self-reliance became a core part of their identity. They had to survive under pressure all by themselves.
The war finally ends in 1988. And the sources quote Khomeini calling the ceasefire drinking from a chalice of poison.
He didn't want to stop, but reality forced his hand.
Which brings us perfectly to the legacy today. Diplomacy versus resistance. The political factions in Iran right now are actually defined by how they view that war.
It's true. You have the hardliners, or conservatives, who look at the war and say, we survived because we resisted and relied on ourselves.
So they support this economy of resistance. Autarky, smuggling, relying on the IRGC to fight current sanctions?
Exactly. Then you have the reformists, or pragmatists. They look at the end of the war and say, diplomacy saved us in the end.
So they use that ceasefire as a precedent for things like negotiating the nuclear deal.
Right. But looking at the institutions today, the IRGC has the real grip. They are deeply embedded in the economy, like construction and telecommunications.
And foreign policy, right. Operating in Syria, managing proxies.
Exactly as the vanguard ideology intended from the start.
So, synthesizing all these sources, the big takeaway is that 1979 didn't just change a government. It created a system designed to resist external pressure at all costs, ruled by a very specific interpretation of Islamic law.
That is the perfect summary. The blueprint became a fortress.
It really did. Yeah. And that leaves us with a provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over. We constantly see this tension in Iran between the republic, the elected officials, and the revolution, the unelected clerics and guards. As the generation that actually fought that holy defense ages out, will this ideology hold? Or will the pragmatic need for survival force a profound change?
That is the ultimate question we are all watching unfold.
Thank you for listening. Do not forget to click like and subscribe and write your opinion in the comment section.